Welcome to Color Me Conscious. We have more in common than difference. Our intention is to explore the intersectionality that unites us and build consciousness about the layers of oppression we all carry.
Color Me Conscious, where consciousness is at the forefront of the discussion about race.
Okay. Welcome to Color Me Conscious.
Hello, hello.
I'm Mylika.
I'm Myra. And we are picking up where we left off last time, continuing the conversation here at Allyship Means Action at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital. Come on.
First of all, I feel like any and almost all information we receive comes through a filter of white supremacy. So first of all, anything that is being told to us via CNN or mostly anything but Black Twitter is coming through that filter. And so what stories are told and which ones are not told, the ones we're supposed to emotionally connect to and not connect to, is told to us through that lens. Like an illustration of that around apathy is, like there's this storm around border separations, but border separations are age old. Right. People have been leaving their homes and their families for economic reasons created by white supremacy, created by the United States of America for 50, 60, 70 years. Right here in San Francisco, there's people who have been raised by people who are not their family because of those reasons, right? So where's the empathy in that situation? And we're talking apples and apples, like we're talking folks from the same lands, right? And then lastly, I think one thing that it's really easy to do, especially in this day and age, is MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. Like, it's really easy to say it's those people over there. It's the people over there that are wearing the hats. But those people are our relatives. They came from our families. We got people, I don't know. I don't have people in Ohio, but there's people, you got people in Ohio. You got people in Wisconsin. Those are your people. Those are my people. We got to figure out what happened there. What made you say those things? What made you get on that side? And what's next? Like, what's next for all of this? We have to figure out what's next. And othering is not going to do that. We have to figure out, like, what made
we have to include those that think differently in the conversation, in the action planning. Right? It's hard to get them to the table. This is literally the choir. Why do I have to preach? I don't have to preach to y'all. You know what we're talking about. You've lived it, you've done the work, or you're going to do the work, and your allies already, right? It's always those that need to hear the message most that don't come to the seminar, that don't come to the training, they don't self-select to come to Diversity 101, right? But
they're the first person who's like, well, why do I need this?
I don't need this.
What are you trying to say about me? Why do you think that I need this?
Ooh, so defensive.
Right.
But what happens, right? There's a barrier there. There's a barrier there. And so, like, at the end of the day, I think at the end of the episode, Myra was even saying, white people have to solve this problem. White people have to go to other white people. Go to your racist uncle. Go to your crotchety aunt. Go to whoever. Whether it's a friend or if it's not, even if it's a stranger. Honestly, a message coming from a white person to a white person is very different than coming from a black person to a white person or any other color. Right? It's just her different. Just like for me as a woman. If a woman comes to tell me, "Ooh, girl, you probably shouldn't do that," I might hear it differently than if a man were to come tell me, "Ooh, girl, you probably shouldn't do that." Like, that's just gonna sound different to my ears. Like, it's not. He may mean well, but really, guy.
There's a book where the author, who is biracial, black and white, talks about how her mother, who's white, one time, some people know this story because Zaya Malawa talks about it. Her mother, who was white, went to work, and there was this black man there, and she was trying to tell her, well, my daughter's, half black, and I'm down with black people. And her daughter told her, yo, your work is not to be down with black people. Your work, or to show that you're down with black people, your work is to work with black people.
That's true.
Ooh, right.
Yeah.
Right. You got a point over here?
So you want to talk about race? I believe that's the book that you're
All right, we're going to put that in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you. What was it? One last point that I was going to make. I really appreciated your point here when it came to it's white people's responsibility to do the work, to talk to other white people and to try and expand people's consciousness. I was talking to a friend of mine who's white, and we were having kind of a similar conversation because I had made a comment in one of our other shows about how, like, I said, you know, I'm white, and even though I'm conscious, I think I'm racist, and I think that all white people are racist. And there was like a lot of people that were like, whoa, what are you saying?
So many
you know,
trolls
like,
came out.
you know, and it's like, oh, like all these things about how like I must have this crazy like white guilt complex and all this other stuff. And I said, no, you know, the reality is like, based on the society that we live in, we're all exposed to conditioning, and it's really like on a subconscious level that, you know, that we have racism within us, and everybody has it, but as white people, because we're like the, you know, biggest beneficiaries of white supremacist culture, which is the culture we all live in, then in like very subconscious ways, we all participate in that. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine based on that podcast, and she was just like, you know, I don't agree with you, like, I don't think I'm racist, you know? She's like, I love black people, and blah, 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 and I was just like,
I got 2 black friends.
I was just like, you know, the thing is, though, like, no matter what, like, what you think, right, when you interact with somebody, like, I'm not even going to go into the whole I love black people comment, but, like, the fact of the matter is, like, there's so many studies done on like propaganda and the effects that it has, right? Like, how arrogant is it for us as individuals to sit here and think like, oh, that affects everyone else, but not me, you know, because I am so smart and I'm so self-aware and I've done so much work that there's no way that, you know, this thing that has made Trump become president, you know, like, there's no way that it could have in any way affected me. And the reality is we're all subject to that, and especially as white people, because white privilege allows us to have these blinders on, then we don't even have to be aware of the ways that we're racist. We don't have to be aware of the microaggressions that we're making against other people and the way that we're making them feel. And so,
and to that regard, there's actually a lovely doctor who's in the co-existence program between UCSF and UC Berkeley. Her name is Dr. Rachel Fields. So she's in a dual program where she's getting her MD, PhD. Her dissertation was called Managing Whiteness.
shout out
to Ms.
amazing.
Rachel Fields. We will have a future episode with her. She already told me she'd do it. So we're gonna, basically what we want to get into with that is a very in-depth discussion about white supremacy, white privilege, white apathy, white fragility, all of those things, because all the whites, all the isms, because really, like, if we're saying that the real work has to be done white to white, it's got to be white on white work, then like, how do you give people that self-identify as white permission to come to the table? How do you give them permission to speak on it without and remove that fear, right? Because if we all, no matter your color, no matter your experience, come to the table with that admission of, okay, I'm racist and it's not my fault, it's this country, but I'm here and I'm ready to do some work about it, right? Like,
I think that's a really important step, like, in being a white ally. If you can't say that you're racist, then you're not ready to do the work as far as I'm concerned.
That part.
That's step one right there. To get comfortable saying, I am racist.
Right.
I am here to work on that.
Right.
And I want to work forward from here.
Because we can't work on something that we refuse to acknowledge.
Well, and it's such a trigger for white people, right? To be accused of being racist, as if it's this like malignment of your character, right? As opposed to a statement about being white in a white supremacist culture.
It's a statement of fact.
Yeah.
Right.
It does, there are judgments that are placed on people, and we place judgments on ourselves, and temper interactions, we're all because of that, right? Because you gotta be politically correct. I don't want to offend anybody. Oh my god, like, what if they think I'm racist? Yeah. What are they gonna do? Are they gonna report it to my boss? People have lost their jobs for being racist. I refuse to be acknowledged. I can't be seen that way. You know what I mean? Barbecue Becky lost her job at Stanford because she was outed as a racist. Like, what? That can't be you. That can't be today. But like, how about instead you flip it and you come from a place of like acknowledging, hey, I'm white, I got privilege, I was born this way, right? So what am I gonna do with it? How can I leverage it for the greater good? And how can I accept the fact that even though I have these privileges and I want other people to not have deficits, it doesn't mean I lose. Because others get more doesn't mean you get less. There's enough to go around. There's literally enough to go around.
Right.
Just because some powers Some systems are shifted. It doesn't mean that those that are at the top get less. We're talking about equity. We're not talking about equality. We're talking about equity. Everybody gets what they need, how they need it.
That sounds like communism.
No.
More comments over
Sorry,
here?
let's go there. Yeah, go ahead.
Going back to the apathy, I guess, I have gone through so many different, phases of emotion with the last, I don't know, however many years, but I mean, I think apathy is really inaction. And I think every day that we're not actually engaging in a change, we are participating in white supremacy. And so I gotta say, like, the like bougie moms in Oakland with like Latina nannies who now all of a sudden care about border separation, who are now radicalizing, like, I can't be mad at them for stepping into a different place than they were before of just the status quo. So I can't, so hearing the podcast, I was like, they're moving. Like yes, maybe they're mobilizing around this issue because it is affecting them in their own little home life. Right. Okay, but like so maybe they're showing up to protest ICE and they weren't going to do that yesterday. So how can we connect with that? Not necessarily shame them for having the blind spots that they've been having, but like how can we all then just keep moving along, understanding that these struggles are all coming from the same root.
Right. How do we welcome them to the party?
Yeah.
Even though they were late getting here. But that's okay.
We're all late. You are benefiting from white supremacy. Like we're all late.
Right.
So like I'm just as late in so many ways as my comrades in arms. You know what I mean? So it's like if we're all late, like how do you know what I mean?
Right.
So
and that's moot. So like let's take off the table.
Yeah. And so I've just been so much more about like, okay, any action you're doing today is better than yesterday because like we can't tolerate what happened yesterday. And we can't really tolerate what's happening today. So like, you know what I mean?
Right, because we can only move forward. We can acknowledge the past, but we can't live there. We can only live in today, and we can only plan for tomorrow.
Yeah.
So like, let's just say.
I like your point because by criticizing, then that can alienate them, and then maybe then be discouraged towards doing other things. It's like we want to be building common ground, and we want to
bound up together. Then you know what I mean? Like okay, like hop on. We all hop on board.
Yeah, this isn't like a conscious Olympics where it's like I'm more conscious than you, and
so
people
are like, oh, I'm not as woke. Like I feel bad. I'm not as woke. Like like help me out. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm so over that.
That's such a good point. Yeah.
That's a very valuable point, and I think it's where a lot of people are, and that's okay too. You know what I mean? Like we said, everybody's at different stages with their work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we all
and even if your work just started yesterday, that's cool. At least you started.
Right.
You're further along than those who don't even acknowledge the work needs to be done. Right? So that's a good thing.
Right.
Get a point back here. Okay.
So I live in Lafayette, right across the town.
Ooh, Lafayette.
Super very homogeneous community, and we have had speakers come to like moms from Oakland and Berkeley, and it doesn't work. I mean, there's definitely like, well, that's not us, and that's So we've actually started to have. There have been moms in the community who've actually done the PowerPoints on conscious bias, and that is, so it comes from within. But even this morning, I was writing in with like the Girl Scout leader, because I'm the cookie person. We were talking about future meetings, and we were like, well, we should talk about racism. We had this whole conversation about like, well, how do we, sort of market, because we realized some families, depending on how you bring it up, like might choose not to participate at all, or might feel like, oh, this is too heavy, my daughter can't go, and sort of like trying to, and I was thinking to myself, how is it that I'm having this conversation, because I feel like I'm watering down everything, I'm sort of implicitly like playing to, whereas, and they're learning all about history, American history, the way the whites, see it, and no one asked, about how so the girls are getting it, and we're trying to tiptoe around how do we say it, but on the other hand, like if we talk about it in a way where people don't feel invited, then we haven't stepped forward. So, there's a lot of discussion and work to be done. Like she and I are still trying to figure out how to do it. Like we want 100% of the families and the girls to be able to walk into a room and feel like they can say something.
Lion's share of that responsibility rests on white people, because I think the struggle is like if you have if you're bearing the burden of the actual racism or discrimination, and then on top of that, you're supposed to be hospitable and invite others to come to the table, you know, there needs to be an intermediary body of people who is like doing that work, so that yes, you can like, you know, not be a total jerk when they come to the table, but it's not on you to do all of that like outreach and empathy, and you know, because it's taxing and you're dealing with your own stuff. I think the piece about like let bygones be bygones, I'm a little uncomfortable with, because I feel like there needs to be an acknowledgement, maybe not on day one, like maybe not the first time you sit down at the table, but at some point people need to acknowledge like that they have privilege, that they, you know, and that there was all of this time that they weren't doing anything. And they don't need to like wear a hair shirt or flog themselves, it could literally be one sentence. But that I think is an important step, because otherwise I feel like it really discounts the lived experience of the last 500 years of, you know, the rest of the people in the United States who have been living with this and haven't had a choice of whether to engage with the concept or not. So that part I think is important, the acknowledgement. You don't have to live there in that guilt, but you have to acknowledge it.
Right. We had another comment here, first at the table, and then
To piggyback on what Anna was saying, I feel where you're coming from. I feel like we need to stop excusing people. Why do we always have to be the ones to be like, oh, they're white, they could be excused. You know, that's how.
Don't get it.
Yeah, they don't get it, and like I don't want to feel that way, but I do. Like I'm tired of excusing you. Like you should excuse me. You know,
Right.
it's my turn.
Right.
So it's like I don't want them to. You know, I want them to move forward. But how do they move forward without me feeling like you just did all of this?
right.
And I had to. Then it was okay, and I had to excuse you.
I think you have such a good point in that, like, raises again the point that Anna was making about the work of white allies. Because when it comes to a lot of times when people are offensive, right, when white people are being offensive, then if there's like, let's say a room full of white people and 2 people of color in the room, one white person says something offensive and the rest of the white people in the room are like, like, did that offend you? And it's like, you know what I mean? I'm like depending on how they react is gonna be how I react. And the reality is, like, me as a white person, I can be offended by another white person being offensive. Like, because across the board, like, we can all have a standard with which everybody should be treated with dignity and respect. You know, and regardless of the fact that I'm not black, I can be offended by the N-word and a white person's use of it, period. And I think that there's a lot of accountability that we as white people need to take about being allies and really having more of a space at the table. One of our episodes was titled, like, Is White a Color? And we didn't touch too deeply into it, but one of the things that we talk about is in diversity is the fact that, like, white people are a part of diversity. White people, I mean, even like the term, like, you know, people of color is an assumption that, like, white people are not people of color, but, like, isn't white a color? So why is it that white people aren't playing a part in this, you know, dismantling of white supremacy? Because in reality, that is our job, it's our work, and we should be doing it. And it's a lack of white allyship that puts you in a position where you have to then be the empathetic person to the white person that, you know, has said something offensive, and it's putting a double burden on you because I'm not doing my part.
As an ally.
Right.
Allyship goes beyond. It goes beyond it goes beyond the offenses, right? Like it happens everywhere. It can happen in the elevator, it can happen in a classroom, it can happen anywhere, and like, but you have to grab it when it's there. I mean, yeah, and so I think, do you have one more?
It's good.
Okay, so
It's like, oh, there's so much more that we
we do need more hours, but what I would like everybody to do is, you know, go ahead and take the questionnaire, try to think about it, sit on it, mull over it, sleep on it, answer the questions, and if you are comfortable giving those to us, I would like to have your answers to the questions on the worksheets. We can include that in more follow-up and keeping the conversation going, because 1 hour is never enough. It gets too deep. But if you're comfortable filling out the worksheets and then sending them to Hillary and sending them to me, Make sure you give the video consent and release forms so that everybody's covered. You can always join us online on Instagram. We're Color Be Conscious Podcast on Instagram. We have a Facebook that's Color Be Conscious Podcast. You can email us at colorbeConsciouspodcast@gmail.com. We really want to keep this conversation going because I know like everybody has a thought. Everybody has a thought, but not everybody said words, and that's okay. That's all right. No judgment there. But we'd love to hear you. I want to know what you think. I really want to know what you think, and other people will be activated by what you think and what you say. So there's no opinion or thought that's discounted or credited or discredited, right? So whatever you think, and even if it's negative, I take criticism too. I would like to know if you have some criticism of what we're saying or how we're saying it, or how the conversation's going in general, right? Like even at a national level, how's the conversation going, and how do you feel it should be going, right? Because if we're talking about inclusion and true diversity, then all of that matters. And thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. And if we made you think and you'd like to continue the conversation, visit our website, www.colormeconsciouspodcast.com, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Color Me Conscious Podcast.